A nice little pillow fort under the table, and it was nice.
Did that in my SiliconValley.com days. Am I streaming and recording both? Looks like.
Yes.
Really got to get the studio back to where it should be. All right, yes, and I see we're up here. All right, welcome back to RPG Research, and this is Theory and Gaming Discussion Monday, which we alternate between Mondays and Thursdays. So this Thursday, John will be running a game.
I will be running Once in Waterdeep.
D&D 5th edition. So that'll be this coming Thursday from 6 to 9. But right now, we're going to go ahead and do some of our theory discussion. Back from the RPG tour, we had a conversation coming up just in a previous segment tonight in our administrative section, but started to go sideways. And went, well, let's bring it back. We're talking because this particular module has a feature that it has the session 0 built into the module.
Correct.
I'm going to talk about that briefly.
Okay, so unlike any of the other published modules that I've ever dealt with, this one happens to be an RPG legal. I almost said RPGA legal. It is an Adventures League legal module, and it is a 4-hour adventure for Tier 1 characters. It is published and available on the DMsGuild.com, and this has a session 0 built into it. They have a setup phase, and when you do the setup phase, the first thing you do is everybody reveals their backstories, and it doesn't say in here, but that obviously should include explaining how you know each other. Then we have to devise the plot points. I have to ask the characters, who would make a suitable antagonist for a group at this level? Then everybody will help design the villain. And we'll go over details of how we're doing that when we do it. Then you have to design an interesting character for the group to meet in the tavern, and what kind of role that person's going to play in the module. And then we have to come up with a role-playing challenge where if two of the players actually do the thing that was listed in the role-playing challenge, everybody's going to get inspiration.
What kind of challenge do you mean?
Okay, here's an example. I'll actually give you two examples, one from the book and one that I'm actually using. Okay. Edda and Claus have an argument about right and wrong. That was the role-playing challenge. Somebody has morality. In my current game where I'm running this at Uncle's in the Valley on Wednesdays, their group, half of the party is Eladrin, which are the elves from the Feywild. And they have a tendency to mirror a specific season in their skin tone and in their mannerisms and things like that. So the challenge that got set up for this particular module was that two of the Eladrin were going to have a discussion about which is the actual best season.
So you get an idea. So this is to start building up a little bit of a connection. So one of the things we've talked about before to have better immersion and potential for flow state in a group, as we talked about in previous sessions, is camaraderie. What can you do to build up player camaraderie? And we've talked about group dynamics, like Tuckman's theories, which are some basic fundamental theories, and then there's many more that build upon that. And you want the group to have some cohesive, cooperative nature, and we've got forming, storming, norming, performing, etc. And when you're in storming phase, it's difficult to have that. When you start to norm, that's doing better. And when you're performing, everything's going great, and that's when you have the best chance for immersion and flow state. But another factor is camaraderie. If nobody trusts anybody else in the party, if everybody else is every person for themselves and doesn't trust that the other ones will be watching their back, and that they're going to be stealing from them because they're the thief stealing from everybody in the party, what have you, there's kind of problems with camaraderie that can make it difficult to enjoy your game if you're always being on the defensive and not really playing cooperatively and focusing on the story and the adventure. For some people, that's a lot of fun. Some Chaos players love that inter-party conflict. They live for it. Yep. as one of the player archetypes.
The whole group is on board for it, right?
Right. That's the problem. Is if only one player loves it and everybody else doesn't, that's not so much fun.
Then we lose players.
Now, like Paranoia. The role-playing game Paranoia assumes you cannot trust anybody else, and that's part of the fun of the game.
Right.
Paranoia is designed to play that way, and that's okay because that's everybody agrees we are playing this way. It's a lot of fun.
Friend Computer, he's explaining the rules.
You want to see a great with the newer version of Paranoia. Ivan Van Norman was GMing with Felicia Day, Will Wheat, and a bunch of others.
That was a blast.
Oh my goodness! Before they even got to play, characters were being destroyed because Will Wheaton is so good at. Oh my goodness! And he's evil. He's good at it, and he's evil. And he did a beautiful job getting one of the characters destroyed before they even started the adventure.
It was he's explaining the rules.
Yes.
Set.
And Ivan Van Norman just went with it beautifully. You can check that out. It's on YouTube, and it was very funny. So in settings like that, it's okay, right? It's expected. It's part of the game. That's part of the fun. But for most games, that's part of why Paranoia doesn't make the best long-term campaign.
Right.
In a setting, it's difficult to have a long-term Paranoia campaign. You talk about an evil campaign or evil character. These are at least very selfish characters.
I was joking.
I know, but I've run evil campaigns. I have run evil campaigns, and it can be done. But most of them will, and you really have to lay down some very clear ground rules. For example, if your evil characters are going to do something really bad, like murder or rape and such, we kind of do the fade to black thing. We don't go into any graphic detail. If you're going to play an evil character, they're going to do evil stuff like that. And you're going to say, yes, I'm going into that village and I'm raping, pillaging, plundering, and these are the evil things I'm doing. We are not going into detail about that. We are not doing the rapey GM thing.
See my class unveils lines, X cards, and
Yes, which was just last week. It was discussed. But all evil groups that I've ever run, and I've run close to 20, at least a couple of dozen evil groups over the decades, they never last. They always eventually turn on each other, or the world turns against them. It depends on if they're out there destroying everything, the world will rise up against them. As they grow, the world rises up. That's just what happens. Unless they're really good at it. The only groups I've seen last more than a few weeks to a few months, so I've had a couple of groups last upwards of a year, give or take, that were evil. The only way that worked is if there was at least one lawful evil leader in the group that everybody else agreed would be the leader. Either because that person was so much more powerful than the rest of the group, the characters, or everybody else just respected that player or player character, that they're willing to defer their freedom to that lawful evil leader. And if that lawful leader is pretty sharp and good at, has good plans about how he's going to grow this empire of evil, they can make it work. They can make it work. And if they're not too greedy, if they don't grow too fast, and if they're careful about not just going out and just taking over everything and making everybody united together against them, and they're careful, for example, you can look at Hitler and such, slowly making deals, and just one by one, at first not doing it too quickly so that the Allies didn't get organized right away, right? He got away with a lot of stuff before the Allies finally got their act together. And that required a lawful evil leader to organize it that way. If you just send out, excuse me,
bless you.
if you just start just destroying everything around you, everybody's going to start rising up to fight back against you, and you're not going to get very far in your empire building. If you're lawful evil and you're not empire building, you just want to, become the most powerful wizard or something like that. So you're not really taking over lands and such as that.
If you want to be a lawyer. Sorry.
That generally won't trigger. You'll start making some arch enemies, but you won't really trigger the world rising up against you if you're careful. If you're just going out one by one and your evil group is going out and stealing artifacts or something like that from some key locations, you're going to make some enemies. But they may not organize enough to rise up against you, and so your evil campaign can continue. So there are ways to do that. But that's rare that other players will give up their freedom to one other player. Right, most of us, at least here in the U.S. In other cultures, that varies a little bit more. But here in the U.S., we have a very more of an independent attitude about that. And like, no, I don't want to be told what to do. Okay, there's a leader. It's only because I'm intentionally going to let him. But if he bosses me around too much, forget it. Right? A little bit more of an independent attitude there. So as I said, I've never seen them last longer than a little over a year, and that's rare. Usually, it's a few weeks to a few months. And it's cathartic for some people, and they have some interesting experiences. And it has to be with a GM who's really careful about controlling how that evil is played, or it can really freak people out. So you have to be very careful. And it's better if you play with mature players. You don't want to do that with little kids and such. And it's kind of sketchy doing it with teenagers, just because they're going to want to try some really messed up stuff, and they're kind of hard to rein in. And so you kind of want to stick with more mature, at least older players and or more mature players, which are not necessarily the same thing.
If you really want to be evil, be the dungeon master.
No, that is no. So, speaking of good game mastering, that would not be good advice for that. But one of the things that we're talking about is camaraderie, though. Yeah. And so there's kind of camaraderie building there. The One Ring, and we home rule it into Adventures of Middle-earth, has fellowship focus, where you automatically are partnered up with somebody else. Something bad happens to the other character, it affects you in a negative way. So even if you don't have real empathy, if you're a stat monger, your character is less effective, you're going to want to take care of the other character just for your own selfish reasons. But it at least fakes empathy, if nothing else. And sometimes, with some of the populations we work with, sometimes you just fake it till you make it. It's better to start with at least emulating the behaviors, and then that's kind of a behavioral therapy approach, as opposed to cognitive. And that helps. The fellowship focus helps bring two strangers who've never met each other before to a community center, a public game, whatever, and work together collaboratively, because they say, okay, your fellowship focus, and that's, Gimli and Legolas, Merry and Pippin, Frodo and Sam, Gandalf and Aragorn, etc. They partnered up, and it helps the game. It does help the game to get camaraderie, but it's only in pairs. But it does help. It really, you see a different playstyle come out. But the ultimate, besides just time, right? When you get the bean in the trenches together, and slowly people build up camaraderie or hatred of each other, depending on how it goes. But hopefully over time you build up camaraderie because you've been through it together and you all have a shared story that only you as a group know compared to everybody else out there. So short of that long-term approach, which is hard to do in a one-shot, they're the best I've ever seen for comrade building before you ever even make your characters even, is A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the Game of Thrones role-playing game, which I do have somewhere on the shelves behind the green screen or something. Yep. Probably for this, we should probably pull the green screen out of the way since we're accessing books and such. So, it just folds up over the top of the shelving there. And
is there a tall person around here?
No.
Relatively. I don't know. There could be a tall person somewhere.
It's not that far up. Come on.
Oh, that's pretty high.
That's eye level. It is.
It's not that high up.
Yeah, and Brandon met me, so he does.
Can you repeat what the book that you were
A Song of Ice and Fire.
I mean the book that you were...
Oh, this, yeah. It's Robin's Laws, A Guide to Good Game Mastering by Stephen Jackson Games. It's from 2001. It's just a 32-page booklet. You can only get it used, like on Amazon and such. Okay, 33 pages. But yeah, we'll be discussing that more in depth here shortly. And we'll be doing this over several sessions. We're starting. This is just part one on this topic. We will be going deep. I'm sorry, John. All right, so this is Song of Ice and Fire, a Game of Thrones role-playing game. And if you like Game of Thrones, it's pretty well done, and it has an interesting system. One of the things that some other features it has is the intrigue system and such, which is pretty good. Which also Babylon 5 has a pretty good diplomatic system. So if you're more into role play, ROLE play over ROLL play, but especially more into that story and politics driven, Game of Thrones and Babylon 5 both. Now Babylon 5 has had several different game system changes. The original one was its own game system, which was different and only had a few supplements. It was in the mid-90s. Then they did it D20 based, and then they did it like 3.5. But anyway, it's 3X based for most of the Babylon 5. And there's a lot of Babylon 5 books. I only have a small fraction of them. They made a lot of freaking books. And then they did a second edition, which was still 3X based. And then, did we just lose Brandon?
Yes, we did.
Okay, hopefully it comes back. I'll refresh on our end in case it was us. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, and then some years ago, Mongoose Publishing with the Traveler System got a hold of Babylon 5 licensing. Yeah, and I don't know if you guys are younger, you may not even know what Babylon 5 is.
You
I've
are
heard you
correct.
talk about it.
I have too. That's
You've heard me talk about it many
Yeah.
times because it is my favorite science fiction series ever. A series, emphasis on series, and specifically television. By far, hands down, nothing else has come close to me, and I keep wanting something else to come close. I really do. When they did the reboot of BSG, and I heard it was going to be gritty, and it was going to have and BSG already had an arc to it in the original campy version, and they were going to make it grittier.
Battlestar Galactica.
Battlestar Galactica, sorry.
Yeah, I know what that one was.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the original late 70s one as a kid. It was fun, and it's campy, but it did have an arc to it early on. It was the most expensive science fiction television series at the time. It was $1 million an episode in the late 70s. That was incredibly expensive, and that's part of why it didn't last. It was too expensive for the numbers. And then they did a cheap version of it, Galactica 1980, where they made it to Earth, and it was so bad. It was so bad. Oh my goodness. I don't think it made the full season.
Yeah.
But one of the last episodes, as the Cylons made it to Earth as well, they revealed for the first time human form Cylons, and I had totally forgotten that.
Oh, wow.
So when they did the rebuild of BSG, everybody threw a fit because one of the key things is human form Cylons were the main focus, and that the old Cylons that we were familiar with, they called them toasters.
Right.
Those are outdated. Those are 50 years ago. Those are ancient. So they kind of did a time shift. It's an alternate reality version. So I heard what they're doing, and they turned a lot of the male characters into female characters, which caused some upset because that's just kind of been the trend and stuff. Which is kind of weird because BSG had a lot of female lead characters too, so it's kind of like, some shows that's really necessary, and other shows like the balance was fine. But anyway, whatever. But it was gritty, and it was an arc, and he had some strong actors. You had Edward James Olmos as Commander
Right.
Dama and stuff. He does a very good job. A lot of good, strong acting in it. Good special. They did it kind of a documentary, loose, shaky cam type thing, give or take on that. But good soundtrack. A lot going for it. I do like it. The BSG reboot I do like, except that it just grinds me down. It just is so grim and grinds you down. You ever see Deadwood?
Yeah.
It just grinds you down. There isn't enough redemption in the show. It just gets grimmer and grimmer and grimmer and grimmer. And
Though some reason I watched all of it.
I've watched all of it, and the problem is if you binge watch, that's the worst part. If you binge watch BSG, it really affects you in a negative way. It really drags you down. If you watch it sporadically, it's not as bad. You get a break in between. But if you binge watch the reboot of BSG, it does something to your psyche. And I've talked to multiple people like, oh man, I had to go watch something light and fluffy after. It just messed me up. And that's the problem with BSG. I think it would have been much better if they could have lightened it up a little bit more in between, a little more humor, because there's very few good people in it. Everybody ends up really betraying so many others. And it's great to have the conflicted hero and all that. I'm all for that. It's great to have that deck that's more realistic in a lot of ways. And on an epic story, we want to have a little bit of redemption mixed in there and a little bit of humor mixed in to lighten it. Otherwise, it's just a really heavy load. So I think that's the only reason BSG I don't put higher up than I do. And for me, that's the closest contender. I mean, a lot of the other series and stuff, even when they started to put arcs in them and stuff, just didn't even come close in their depth and the planning ahead and everything else that Babylon 5 did. J. Michael Straczynski, JMS, planned it all out. It took him 8 years to find a studio to even take it, because this was back in the 80s when they said, no, everybody wants a 1 or 2 episodes. They don't want a long arc. Everybody has a long day at work. They want to come home, watch some fluff on the TV, and be done with it. They want a beginning, middle, and end all in one episode. Okay, maybe have a carryover at a season finale or something. And so it took him 8 years to find a studio that would even accept his concept of a 5-year pre-planned arc, with a whole bunch of little mini arcs in between that some resolve at different times, and really rich, complicated character development, while also a little bit of camp and a little bit of that, and a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff based in sci-fi setting. But he did finally get that accepted, and there were challenges, but the show did finally get its 5 years. And it's a lot of political intrigue. It really is. Without being as heavy as Game of Thrones, it is space political intrigue. It is all of these political negotiations.
Lots of diplomacy.
Because it's a diplomatic station. The whole
Right.
point is it's a diplomatic station, so there isn't another big war and such. So, which nearly wiped out the human race before. They didn't want that to happen again, so they set up the station. And it was because of one misunderstanding, right? And that's why. So, the Babylon 5 D20 system has a really interesting diplomacy system. Using, it's based on D20 3.x.
Right.
It uses the grittier version in that your hit points are minimal. Like you get one hit die, and like each level you get maybe one hit point. You do not get many hit points. It is not about if you're getting in combat, you're probably going to die very quickly.
It doesn't matter if you're 12th level or 1st level, a bullet's going to kill you.
Exactly, or in this case, PPGs and such.
Right.
But yeah,
The gas-based
exactly.
bullets.
Yeah, and but they also have telepaths and such are a big deal in this, and they've got a pretty comprehensive telepathy system that's pretty cool. And it's different for different races, and because that was a big part of Babylon 5. That was the next stage in his series, was the telepath wars,
Right.
which is really awesome. And Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov in the original Star Trek series, which I got some autographs from because we saw him at Fan Nexus last year. He plays a character called Bester, who's an evil telepath leader with the Psychops. And he does a really good job. Chekhov is kind of, it's fine. Bester's an interesting character. And they did a good job with him. But anyway.
So he doesn't have to ask where the nuclear vessels are.
Exactly. No fake Russian accent or anything. He's got a toupee on, though, because he went bald, and so I think so he's got an obvious toupee. But it kind of works for the character that he's playing, and
right.
It kind of works.
It has
It's
that level of
because yeah. Anyway, I could do a whole show just on Babylon 5. I'll shift gears. But anyway, they've got the diplomacy rules. It's very interesting. If you're not familiar with them, check them out. I love Babylon 5, but the current version in publication through Traveller sucks. I like Traveller, but Mongoose's recent version of their adaptation of Babylon 5 to Traveller is broken. The stats they did not put a lot of effort into when they got the license, and so unfortunately the Traveller editions of the books are badly broken, and I can't recommend them, unfortunately, without a lot of fixing. And if they put some fixes out, I apologize. I'm not aware of those fixes. I would love to, because Traveller's a nice system. I don't have a problem with the system itself, but yeah, they did not take good. And there's not a lot. I have all that's available for the Traveller one. It's that much as opposed to the rest. And as I said, the D20 version has a ton of material. And JMS oversaw a lot of that material, so a lot of it is canon correct and such. Okay, so we were talking about political intrigue and such, but and so Song of Ice and Fire has a really good intrigue system. So we've got diplomacy system, intrigue system, they're related. And it's a different style of role play than your typical campaign adventure style of role play, which is more what this is focused on. But what's relevant in this is the house building rules, where before you ever make your characters, you have a game session 0, like you're talking about. But you're not talking about the villains yet. You're not talking about, all your characters yet. None of that exists yet. You have your setting that it's in. So in this case, the Game of Thrones setting, with all the kingdoms and all those powers. Those all exist already. You're aware of those. And through a combination of pick lists, points, and dice rolls, you form your own house, which is basically your own team. And it tells you whether you're a wealthy house or poor house, roughly geographically where you're located, if it's nicer or, whatever, how many forces you have, what kind of political relationships. If you're a young house or you've been around for a long time, you figure out your mottos, you figure out your imagery, your heraldry, all of this you figure out. It takes between half an hour to 2 hours depending upon the experience of your players. By the end of this 2-hour session, everybody is together. They are a unified whole. They haven't even made their characters yet. Every time I've done this, I'm just like, wow, this is completely different than what you see in other role-playing game session 0s. And then you make your characters. And it doesn't preclude you having a completely out there character. If you ever read Game of Thrones or watch the movies, you have Greyjoy. Is it Greyjoy? It's been a while since I read and played this.
Yeah, Greyjoy.
Greyjoy is a hostage for another house. So he's completely different. He's not related except that he's a hostage in the house. So he's able to be from a completely different house and still be part of this house. And
they treated him like family.
right. And that was for that particular dynamic. It isn't always that way. But so you could be from anywhere. It doesn't preclude what you want to play as a character. If you say, no, I want to be a Greyjoy, but part of this house, we can make that work. I want to be from clear across... What's that?
Oh, sorry. That's a really interesting way to tap into like tribal dynamics.
Yes,
in order
exactly.
To, like, just jumpstart the camaraderie you're talking about.
Exactly.
That's a really clever way to do it.
It is. It's very powerful and very effective. I've done it several times now, and I keep seeing it reproduced. It works now they're part of the team, or as you say, the tribe. It is now us against the rest of the world.
What is the science fiction post-apocalyptic game where you had to create a village?
Was that with Brad?
Yeah.
Mutant Zero?
Mutant Zero, yeah.
Yeah. Mutant Zero, I think, had something kind of similar to that, but we
Yeah.
kind of glossed it over. We didn't spend a lot of time on it, did we?
No.
Yeah.
So you wanted to get into the role-playing dynamics.
Right, but yeah, that might have had some similarities there. Mutant Day Zero or something like that. Yeah. So then my question was, well, is this peculiar to the Game of Thrones setting? Right? Can you do this in another setting? Now, clearly, you have to do it in some sort of setting that has the concept of a house or something to connect with. So I was looking, so that kind of medieval concept or feudalist concept. So the closest one I can think of in D&D, I was doing this with another group who was having trouble with another GM. Was like, help! I can't get my group to quit killing themselves because they never seem to unify. They never get past the storming phase. My language, not his, but you get the idea. So I put them in a World of Greyhawk setting with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition and had them do the house building because I have the box set of World of Greyhawk, which has a wonderful glossary that tells you all the resources available for every kingdom, the geography, the weather, how many people there are. All these things are really well spelled out. So it requires a setting that has that level of detail to work with the mechanics that are in here because it has that level of detail. But I was like, well, can I just bolt this into another setting and just kind of cross-reference? I'll make this kingdom as this kingdom and this kingdom because there's some similarities. And will it have the same effect? And it did. And that group became way more effective than all their previous year or two of dying.
Right.
It completely changed their player dynamics because they were us rather than, struggling along.
I wonder if you could apply that also to like, not necessarily a house, but how to be a business or a sports team.
Sure.
Or
I think you could.
Something like that.
Theoretically, and totally in line with your anthropological background, theoretically, as long as you can create that team mentality, that tribal mentality in some parallel that they're helping build, theoretically that should be totally repeatable. So in a sci-fi setting or whatever. So EVE Online, are you familiar with EVE Online, Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay, so that has their whole corporations and such, and it's brutal. It is totally, oh my goodness, that is a brutal, time-consuming Morpeg. Are you familiar
I'm not
with
good
it?
enough with spreadsheets to play that game.
Heard of it, but
So it is the most Darwinian of all the Morpegs out there, massive multiplayer online role-playing game. And the admins are hands-off, unlike other games where they kind of micromanage you. Other than hacks and breaking the system, they do not intervene about like player bullying and all of that. They're like, you can't deal with it, you're in the wrong game. So you literally start out basically almost a podded space, basically, come through a time thing, and the first thing that happens is the pirates take whatever wealth you had, or you can join, or whatever. But you have to try to struggle your way up and try to earn credits and try to build your own ship, and it creates factions. And these factions can be dominant for a long time. So when I was evaluating it years ago, I blogged about it years ago, the Russians were controlling like 2/3 of what known area. And everybody else had ganged up, was starting to consolidate against, and I mean the real Russians, real live Russian players, had just completely taken over and they were dominating. And they were taking everybody else's assets. So now what was left, everybody was starting to unify against them. My understanding is eventually, and they've been dominating for about 2 years. In 2 years, it's frustrating people. And my understanding is it did finally get flipped. They finally had a few decisive battles, and things started, they started to organize, and it got flipped. And I don't know where it is now. That was like 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was. But you could certainly do that. Those people say, yes, I am part of corporation this, or I am part of fleet this. So you could totally, I think, apply the same concepts where you do that before you ever make your characters. And I think you would get that similar effects. Because everybody now has buy-in. They helped create this faction together. Everybody has, and the way it mandates everybody has to participate in the process. It makes sure everybody has some say. And that you have to do some give and take to say, well, we don't like that, let's do that. And that's why it can take from half an hour to 2 hours, depending on the group. So very fascinating. So that I don't know, again, I'm only into page 11. I don't think any of that stuff comes up in here, so I wanted that to kind of just be, there's many different styles of role play in many different systems. This book is going to talk about a more GURPS and D&D focused style, although it does also touch on Vampire the Masquerade and a few others, which is good, and it covers a few different varieties.
How do you want me to do it?
Yeah, because I got a leg cramp as soon as I went down.
Oh, sorry, man.
So, ow.
And I haven't, so far I see that it does touch a little bit on play style, on archetypes. I haven't seen anything yet on developmental levels, group formation stages, flow, or bleed as other topics we talked about. But again, I'm only page 11.
Right.
And he won't use that kind of term. Although he does mention Skinner, B.F. Skinner at one point, which is conditioning, which is, behavioral therapy related conditioning. He does mention that briefly, so we will see. So Robin D. Laws, edited by Steve Jackson, covered by Peter Bergling. I think that's an L. I'll read quickly about the author, so where he's coming from. I like his description; it's kind of funny. Robin D. Laws has served as designer or lead designer for such role-playing games as Feng Shui, Rune, Hero Wars, and Dying Earth. And I have to say, I own none of those games. I have RuneScape. I don't have Rune. So I'm not familiar with any of those. Are you familiar with any of those? I've heard of them.
Yeah, I've definitely heard them, but I have not played a single one of them. Feng Shui, though, I've heard is, of those, one of the better ones.
Okay. Brandon, have you heard any of these?
One of them sounded familiar. I don't remember what it was though.
Feng Shui, Rune, Hero Wars, and Dying Earth.
Hero Wars is actually the one I have not heard of.
Okay. Anyway, and any audience members who want to comment, feel free. Throughout this whole thing, we would love to have you discuss this with us. He's also a regular columnist for Dragon Magazine, now defunct. Soon to take on similar duties for Star Wars Gamer, so I guess it's a Star Wars Gamer magazine. Again, this is 2001, so we're doing the time warp here. In addition to oodles of adventures and supplements for companies like White Wolf, FASA, Pinnacle, Last Unicorn, and Wizards of the Coast, he worked on the collectible card game Shadow Fist, never heard of it, and the computer game King of Dragon Pass.
Yeah, right.
Yep. With cruel and mercenary intent, he urges you to check out his novels. I love that. Pierced Heart and The Rough and the Smooth. So those are his novels. Pierced Heart and The Rough and the Smooth. He urges you with cruel and mercenary intent. The latter is the heartwarming tale of two anthropomorphic naked mole rats and the hideous carnage that ensues when they involve themselves in human politics. Intrigued now? So I like his twisted sense of humor. Robin is pleased to once again appear under the banner of Steve Jackson Games, who years ago published his first full-length book, the legendarily twisted and freakish GURPS Fantasy II Adventures in the Mad Lands. And that's... and so... and cover again... and yeah. So... I'm going to literally read from this, and then we will pause and discuss a lot of the topics that come up. So the great, immutable, ironclad law. Game designers, yours truly included, are an egotistical, control-hungry breed. That's why we prefer to avoid contemplating a certain essential truth of the role-playing game. When you look at the various factors that determine whether any given group of players has a good gaming experience on any particular night, all of our efforts account for, at the absolute, outside best, maybe 30% of the equation. The hours upon hours of playtesting, the painstaking research, the time we sweat away messing with minor details on all those freaking maps, all of it matters way less than we like to think. Now this is not a primer. This book assumes at least a glancing familiarity with the fundamental concepts of role-playing. Space is limited, so I'm not going to repeat the basic lessons on GMing found in various core rule sets. You've played enough games to know a PC from an NPC. Although it was interesting in the interview this week with the person interviewing me from the CTRS, she listed everything as a GM PC if it was a long-term NPC. I was like, huh, okay. It's still an NPC, it's just a long-term NPC, but that was the terminology she's grown. She's been a gamer about 3-4 years, GM 2 years. That's the terminology she's learned, so I thought that was interesting. You know what adventure is and can tell a dungeon crawl from a mystery. Over time, you've learned to spot the quirks of style that differentiate the various players in your group, player archetypes. Although you may find it useful in making the leap from player to GM, this book is primarily intended to sharpen your skills after you've been running games for a while. If the advice here seems a bit daunting, just go off and play for a bit and develop your own way of doing things. After doing that, come back and see if my resounding jibber-jabber makes more sense. Don't ever feel like a bad or inadequate GM because you don't follow the advice given in this or any other book. If you're having fun, you're doing it right. So what really makes a difference in the success or failure of a role-playing session is you, as the game master. Your participation, whether as GM or player, has much more influence on the fun your group has than all of the game products in the world. I agree with that. Anybody want to contest that, argue with that? Thoughts on that? Brandon?
Oh, no, that sounds right to me.
Okay. Please do interrupt. I want this to be more of a discussion than just a straight reading. So please interrupt if you want to comment, say, even if it's an agreement but you want to elaborate, please do interrupt, okay? So rulebooks are not role-playing games any more than a screenplay is a movie. I like that.
Yeah, makes
Nice
sense.
little statement. The reams of material game companies produce provides but a blueprint for the real thing. The role-playing game doesn't start until a bunch of people sit down, open up their dice bags, riffle their character sheets, and wait for the GM to clear his voice and say, "Okay, last week you'd all gotten into the escape pod and ejected yourselves into the heart of the Glangiri Nebula, ... This is both the blessing and the curse of the role-playing form. In a culture increasingly driven towards passive consumption of exhaustively researched mass-market entertainments, gamers take part in a form that not only rewards but demands active participation. This is a big thing in therapeutic recreation about there is attendance and participation. They are not the same thing. And as recreation therapists, we want people participating in the activities, not just attending the activities. And that's very important as game masters and such. What happens on any given night may not be as polished or quickly paced as even a middling episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But it's great because it's yours. It's the active participation, the mixture that arises from the interplay between your thinking and your imagination that makes role-playing so vital and special. Ironically, it is this very strength that will prevent role-playing, now this is where I don't agree, prevent role-playing from ever becoming a mass phenomenon. This is in 2001 when it was much smaller than it is now. It's still small compared to other things,
Right.
but it's really growing. Someday we'll probably find ourselves making regular treks to our local multiplexes to see movie versions of our favorite role-playing properties up on the big screen, but that won't be the same. I agree, it's not the same scene on the movies. And some of the D&D movies have been really bad, especially the first one.
I consider Lord of the Rings a D&D movie.
Well, certainly what they did to it.
Yeah.
Certainly The Hobbit. Oh my goodness. And multiplexes, I think, are going to become more and more passe, as they are. I mean, again, it's more about personal control and consumption in our homes and home theaters and smartphones and all of that. Do you guys go to the movie theaters?
I can't because it's too loud, it's too bright of a screen in a dark room for me.
Okay, and it's expensive.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. What about you?
I saw Venom last week.
Okay. Do you go regularly to movies?
Probably like once, for sure, once every 2 months, maybe once a month.
Okay, so you're a pretty regular moviegoer then, for your generation especially. How much percentage of your media that you consume that are movies would you say you go to the movie theater versus other media formats?
When you say, like, so all movies,
Mm-hmm. So if you watched 100 movies,
how many of those?
how many did you see in the theater?
I'd probably say 20. So
Oh, really?
like
Okay.
5%.
Yeah, you're a pretty avid moviegoer then.
Well, I'm not an avid movie watcher.
Okay.
So I don't watch a lot of movies at home.
Okay. So when you do, you like to do the full experience of the popcorn
just-
and all of that, and
I just don't watch a lot of movies in general, so
Okay.
it kind of weights it to seem like I go. see
what kind of
movies.
media do you consume?
TV.
Okay. Do you read?
I do not know.
Oh.
Well,
I mean, for
He is literate.
yes,
I
but I mean
can
as
read.
far as for
I can read.
entertainment. Okay, so you mostly like
I'm-
broadcast television, cable television, internet television.
mostly broadcast television.
Really?
Like,
Interesting. You know, that's really unusual for your
I
age
know,
group.
but it's only because we don't have internet at our house, so I can't watch
Oh.
stuff like Netflix.
Well,
or
that would
YouTube.
make that's a
Yeah.
huge variable.
So it's
It's
very
an
important.
outlier.
for-
Are you out in the countryside? Is that why? or-
I'm in like this very specific spot
That is
where
nothing.
the only thing that's there is satellite,
Well, it sucks.
and
I've
they
done
always have
satellite.
limits on their Wi-Fi.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty great.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, okay, that's interesting. So you're definitely an anomaly, though.
Yes.
Stone Age.
Well, late 20th century. All right, so may not be the best representation
No.
of the population. How about yourself, Brandon?
I used to work in a movie theater, actually.
Oh.
So we would get free movies with guests and popcorn and drinks. So my girlfriend, who also works there, and I would go all the time.
Cool.
But since we moved and we don't work there anymore, our like movie watching has definitely dropped. So we go every few weeks, once a month, maybe
Okay.
once every couple months.
That's
depending
still-
on what movies are out.
That's still statistically pretty frequent. So interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but most of what we watch is on like Netflix or Hulu,
Right.
or
Yeah.
just plug in a movie to.
So what percentage would you
to-
say you have movies you actually go to see them in a movie theater?
I'm not sure.
All right, that's fine.
Probably 10 or 15%. I get
Yeah,
a
maybe.
lot from Netflix,
Mhm.
but also Redbox.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Well, what about you?
I'm a total anomaly. I've been boycotting the MPAA and RIA since 2001, the Motion Picture Association of America and the
What
Film
month
Industry
in
Association of
2001?
America. What month?
Yeah, about.
I think it started when all my employees in Silicon Valley went to the Adobe march against Adobe when they arrested Skylar off. I don't know if you know that whole story about PDFs and everything. And they all had, I still have somewhere an Adobe sickle and hammer, Adobe shirt and stuff, but they got me. Because I went in information security for a long time, and so prior to that I don't have much of a footprint. I'm all too painfully aware of people's lives that have been ruined because of the MPA and RIA and stuff they've done to people because of claims of copyright violation that weren't always valid. They were suing little old ladies and dead people. It's craziness. It's completely wacky. And so I've been boycotting their products ever since because they've gotten too big for the britches. So I go to independent films. I will watch independent films down at the Magic Lantern and such. And I support, like, through Kickstarter and stuff. For gamers, everything. I go out of my way to support smaller independent films and organizations. But most of those are not available in movie theaters, right? And Magic Lantern. Now, Katie was a huge film buff. She went to all the film festivals for years, and she was part of the film. When she was in college, she was part of the film club organizer and all of that. So she's a huge consumer of it, and so that's been interesting. So we try to go to the independent films. But even then, I probably see one or two movies a year in a theater because there's just not that many truly independent. Because Sony, because there's been millions of people boycotting their products, it's less. Your generation isn't as aware of this, so you guys just kind of just like, oh, I don't care if they're doing all these things. I don't care.
Yeah, like
This goes back to Napster and all of those days.
The rest you brought up, I was 1 month old when that happened.
Yeah,
I don't even
exactly.
know
In MGM versus Grokster in 2004, the Supreme Court ruled that the creator of the technology can be liable for the misuse of the technology, which has completely changed the evolution of technology in this country and has caused a huge chilling effect to stop innovation in this country. and we're getting left behind by the rest of the world because we let that case stand. MGM versus Grokster. MGM sued Grokster. Grokster was like Napster, where it was an app that everybody could share files, peer-to-peer networking, which has wonderful, we use it all the time. When you're downloading stuff, you're doing peer-to-peer all the time. Lots of legitimate uses. But because a certain percentage of the population decided to also use it to share pirated products, they went after the creator of the software rather than the people who were committing the crime. And it eventually escalated to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, creator of the software is liable for not putting enough protections on there, and so basically the way it works out, and this is an oversimplification, but this is what people understand. If I invent a new super efficient shovel that's really good at digging, but the majority, 10 to 30% of the people decide that that's a really good way to go around killing people, I'm liable because I didn't put enough protective equipment on the shovel to stop them from making it more efficient for killing people.
But like, how can they deal with that?
Exactly.
Oh,
It has made developers. So here's what happens. I
Same
come from
lawsuits
tech.
against Winchester.
Well,
and all
no,
that.
I've watched a whole bunch of technologies that were about to come out the door over the internet. Go, oh, we got to take this to the lawyers, and the lawyers go, there's no way to protect you on this. It's too dangerous. Don't release it, or at least not in the U.S. And so all those technologies either don't get released at all, or get released in other countries, and then maybe trickle back to the U.S. But they have to do it in other countries and such. So those technologies aren't happening here anymore.
Are there other countries with the same rule that we have, or is it?
Increasingly, yes.
Okay.
Bit by bit, and that's where the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO's issue. Anyway, this is not what we're here to talk about. But I watch maybe 1 or 2 movies in a theater a year because of that. And yeah, I go out of my, I don't buy, like if I still buy DVDs and stuff, but I only buy them used unless they're fully independent. Sony got, and I was a DJ, I was a radio DJ, and so all my music I had to buy used at pawn shops and stuff to stick to my guns on this. Sony got, enough people did this back in the decade ago that it hurt Sony sales, so they started creating independent labels that pitched themselves as independent music and movie companies, but they were owned by Sony. But to trick people into thinking they were independent labels, and they're still around. A lot of these companies are independent, they're not really, they're owned by bigger companies, but it's as a response to the boycotts. So it had enough of an effect for them to spend the money to create these separate companies and release films through these supposed independent companies that aren't actually independent.
A Sony company at the bottom.
Exactly. You got to watch for that, though. And they didn't used to put that.
How did we get on this topic? I'm so confused.
Yeah, it was about watching how many movies, and I said, well, I'm an anomaly.
Wait, so why did you ask us how many movies?
I asked you guys how many movies you watch in a movie theater in a year,
But
what
why?
percentage. Because of the content here, he talked about we're going to watch our favorite role-playing games in the movie theaters, in big movie
Oh,
multi-boxes.
right.
Okay, so getting back on track. So tangent to a tangent to a tangent. Oh, yeah. No ADHD at all. Not at all.
No.
Squirrel. All right. So, yeah. So the sentence that triggered it was, in a culture increasingly driven towards passive consumption of exhaustively researched mass market entertainments, gamers take part in a form that not only rewards but demands active participation. What happens on any given night may not be as polished or quickly paced as even a middling episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it's great because it's yours. It's the active participation, the mixture that arises from the interplay between your thinking and your imagination that makes role-playing so vital and special. Ironically, it is this very strength that will prevent role-playing from ever becoming a mass phenomenon. That's what he says. Someday, we'll probably find ourselves making regular treks to our local multiplexes to see movie versions of our favorite role-playing properties up on the big screen, but that won't be the same. Maybe the interactivity of, now this is where it, so I didn't, it won't be the same, I agree with. Maybe, and this is in 2001, so this was prescient on his part, the interactivity of the internet or the cultural seeds planted by Pokemon will make new generations more receptive to our elusive and delightful hobby. And I would agree with him on that has kind of happened. It has become more accepted. The stigma against role-playing gaming stuff is greatly reduced because of incursions like that.
I would also
Pokemon,
say that
yes.
the interactivity of the internet has made it easier to connect to other people
Yes.
within the hobby.
Of course. Of course.
Less, islands.
Yes. Like as we were doing right now. Spokane, Washington, Tucson, Arizona. Exactly.
A
And
tale of two cities.
yes. and
The best of times.
although Tucson's quite a bit larger than Spokane. And anybody who's on Twitch, which isn't a whole lot right If role-playing is to grow, and that's why I like to emphasize the verb role-playing as opposed to the noun role-playing game. You know, the ing part of role-playing. And that's kind of what he's emphasizing there is the verb. It's not really a role-playing game until you're doing it. If role-playing is to grow creatively, game designers will have to continue to experiment and push the limits. Hear, hear. Just as painters, musicians, and authors have done ever since their respective fields were born. But if we're to improve the quality of individual games and the overall popularity of the form, we need to look more closely at the other 70% of the experience, the part that arises from each group's individual interactions. And we talk about Abaddon's interaction patterns and such. Let's not go into any of that, but it's important to know. Brandon, when you get a chance, on www.rpgresearch.com, type in Abaddon for AVEDON for Abaddon interaction patterns. It's something I talk about frequently. And the main thing with role-playing gaming is it's the intra-group interaction patterns. So they're working cooperatively.
Can you spell that again?
Abaddon, AVEDON. And somewhere in our video collection, we have a whole lecture on that topic alone.
All right. Got it.
Okay. Though every player makes a huge contribution to a session, the session with the person with the greatest influence over its success is you, the game master. Pretty much agree with that.
80%. Maybe.
At least I assume you're a GM, unless a copy of this book has leapt into your hands by its own cruel volition. Weirdly, given the number of game books published every year, the techniques of good GMing have never been well communicated in print. This is 2001 again. They've been trying to, but I'd still say it's still a little. There's a lot of fluff out there. We got the Monty Cook games one. We'll see how that goes. He talks about Kobold's games for Guide to Game Design. The GM advice chapter of a new role-playing game is always the first bit to get hacked away when the crunchy rules bits begin to overrun the desired word count, as they inevitably do. Instead, in this all-important area, we revert to an oral culture, passing down the tricks of the art from experienced GM to novice. Insert labored shamanism metaphor here. This tradition, too, contributes to our little subculture's quirky charm, but it has its pitfalls. Just as the details of a sentence are invariably lost and garbled in the grade school game of telephone, the most basic ideas of good GMing too often fail to make it up the stream of communication from one budding game master to the next. Are you guys familiar with telephone?
Yes.
Okay, good. There was some group I ran into a few weeks ago that didn't know what that was.
That's strange to me. I used to play that like during lunch in 6th grade.
Yeah. No, I know that. I thought it was a common thing, and then I ran an entire group of people, and they were younger generation, had no idea what the game was, and I was like, wow.
Maybe
And I had to
should've said
explain
cell
it and
phone.
everything.
Like, what's a telephone?
But no, even when I explained the game, none of them had ever played it. I'm trying to remember, where was I? What was that group I was with? It was a group of people.
I'd say.
Just call them out.
Yes?
Oh, sorry. Referring to the text here.
Yes.
I'd say that may have changed a bit. I know that 5e focuses, at least in my experience with 5e, it devotes a good amount on like the art and craft of DMing.
Well, the DM guide does a lot more.
The DM guide does, yeah, in the 5th edition one. But earlier editions...
Because it's dedicated to that, yeah.
Right.
Also on like YouTube,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
so many.
Yep.
Like,
But that's oral.
just-
That's not written.
True.
Right.
What
There are
I'm
plenty of
thinking,
forums. Yeah, there are tons of fora that debate this at great length. But he's meaning mostly the printed books, and I agree with you though that some of these newer versions do spend more time on that than they used to back in 2001. 2001, we're still in 2nd edition, barely coming out with 3rd edition D&D, and so there's a lot going on. And it was kind of a slump time too. It was before
Right.
it had a little spike with 3rd edition, and then it slumped again around 07 because 4th edition was so bad. They barely survived. Wizards of the Coast almost, that was rough. Paizo ate their lunch. Let's see. I submit to you that the most important yet most often forgotten rule of good GMing is this. And I've been putting numbers by his rules here. So number 1, role-playing games are entertainment. Your goal as GM is to make your games as entertaining as possible for all participants. Thoughts, comments?
I would have to agree. I mean, you're there to entertain. Even if you're doing a therapeutic setting, the entertainment is what keeps them engaged. Anybody else?
Maybe.
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 What else? What other goals should you have?
Well, I don't know how much as a GM you should be entertaining them. I mean, you should definitely push for it, but I feel like the players should be trying to entertain.
So let me read it again.
Okay.
I agree. I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying in the context of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Role-playing games are entertainment. Your goal as GM is to make your games as entertaining as possible for all participants. Now, remember how he defines a game. The game in role-playing game doesn't happen until everybody's there at the table and you're interacting together as a group, and that 30% is the rules, 70% is that interaction with each other. The GM needs to.
It's not.
Yeah.
He's not saying that your GM has to entertain the players.
Right.
The GM has to make a game that is entertaining.
That whole
for
experience is
everybody,
entertaining.
players and
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying, though, because if you look at it just in the vacuum by itself, that's what it looks like, is the GM needs to be the entertainer. And he doesn't say that he needs to be the entertainer. He says that you need to make your games as entertaining as possible for all participants. That includes the GM, which is different than just being the entertainer. That's a very important distinction. So I think he phrased that very carefully, appropriately.
Right.
But I had some of those.
I would agree with him.
Yeah.
Too, because
Sure.
at the end of the day, it's a game, and games are meant to be fun.
Right.
At their core,
Exactly.
fun is the experience that is central to it.
Exactly. Sure, it sounds pretty obvious, lying there all italicized on the page like that. It is nonetheless the great, immutable, ironclad law to which the above chapter head alludes. How many times have you sat at the gaming table, bored and struggling, stuck in the middle of a session run by a GM who seems to have lost all touch with this simple principle? How many times have you, as GM, gotten derailed by your pursuit of some seemingly important goal and lost touch yourself with the entertainment value of your game? The mission of this book is to improve your GMing. No matter how good you are, you can keep getting better. I underlined the heck out of that one. All of us, we're old grognards, what have you, 40 plus years of GMing, we know what we're doing.
Old COBOL, new tricks.
I remember when. No, we can always keep improving. That's just human nature. Like all of us, you'll have your good days and your bad. On your good days, inspiration takes hold, and you don't need to think about theory. You just do it. This book is for the bad days, to give you the technique to get you through rough patches. Now, even if this book were so thick that no one would want to lift it from the shelf, it couldn't contain every possible useful techniques. It probably leaves out some of your favorites. But specifics aside, you can get yourself out of almost every GMing trap by asking yourself the following question. Number 2. What would be the most entertaining thing that would possibly happen right now? The rest is mere detail. Now, I don't agree with him entirely on that, because you have to do that in the context of the big picture. Just doing what's the most entertaining thing right now may sacrifice what would be more entertaining down the road. So be very careful.
I was thinking about something exactly like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you suddenly say, what would be really funny is if a clown just jumped up and
Right.
disrupted all of this.
Right.
Yeah. Then
Yeah.
everybody gets side railed off on the clown story.
And so I would amend it without sacrificing the future. That would be my amendment to that. What do you think of that?
They're about to fight a boss. Roxfall, everyone dies, and everyone acts all surprised when they might get a little laugh out of it, but the campaign's gone now.
Exactly. Now, if you're doing a one-shot,
Yeah.
you've got a limited window. You may not have a future. It might be that's all you need to do. But especially an ongoing campaign, this is where you can get in a lot of Monty Hall trouble. Like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if Yeah, let's give them phasers. I don't care if it's medieval. Let's give them phasers. All right, they got phasers. All right, now let's give them grenades. Yeah, let's give them grenades. Oh, that'll be so funny. Won't that be so, and everybody's having a great old time. And it works great for that session. And then the next session, they're blowing everybody up, and so you have to raise the monster quotient, right? And then it escalates really fast. And every GM goes through.
What you end up with is basically Skyrim with like 500 mods on there.
Yes. Or just normal Skyrim. Where, like, you find all those glitches that just happen to be there and never get fixed.
So I would amend that rule.
A giant hit me and I went flying into the sky. I lost it.
Oh, sweet.
So I would amend that rule to, what would be the most entertaining thing that could possibly happen right now without sacrificing the future? That's how I would amend that. What do you think of that?
I would agree with
Better
that.
fit? Okay. Knowing your players. If at least 70% of the success or failure of a gaming session depends on interactions between participants, any preparation to improve your GMing style must begin with a look at the people you'll be playing with. This is a point almost all published GM advice fails to address. Mm-hmm. Even good advice tends to address itself to an ideal group who all happen, as the result of marvelous coincidence, to share the same tastes the rule set in question happens to aim at. In reality, though, no group is ideal. Certain players show different degrees of commitment than others. Some face a blizzard of competing commitments and can't show up regularly. All players participate with varying degrees of attention and enthusiasm. Some folks are deferential towards the tastes and desires of their pals, while others see only their own desires. Tastes in role-playing vary considerably. Otherwise, there would be only one role-playing game, which everyone would play in the same manner. Boy, is that not the case.
Yep.
Look at the shelving around us. So, number 3. There is only one way to role-play, the way that achieves the best balance between the various desires of your particular group. It's a pretty safe statement, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of covers the basis in a very broad, theoretical way, but yeah, okay, yeah, I can't really argue with that. Anybody have any argument with that particular broad statement? Okay. So, in-game preferences, and so I put a little note in here, as I said, I just started reading this today. So our intake process, when I use it, I haven't used it in a while, but our intake process has assessments for interest levels in genre, game style, complexity, player type, settings, and motivations. So different questionnaires help us have an idea of what this new person coming in likes, even if they don't know. They may have never role-played before, so it's asked in terms that aren't specific to role-playing, but answer those of us who are running the game role-playing needs.
Where would we get these questionnaires?
I need to make them publicly available again because they're on the old site as various PDFs or on my laptop.
But so that was in that book. What would he be talking?
Oh, he doesn't have. Oh, he's got a very simple checklist, not a questionnaire. He has no questionnaires. He has. We'll talk about where you evaluate the players.
Oh.
But if you don't know them, that doesn't help you.
Yeah.
We have. I say we. I mean I. But I have used over the years intake questionnaires, and they're in various states of more complete, less complete. But I've used them, and they've been really helpful. And they answer a lot of things that he's going to cover here. In-game preferences. Everybody comes to the gaming table for slightly different reasons. Our biggest task as GMs is to direct and shape individual preferences into an experience that is more than the sum of its parts. Accepting that each player's preferences and desires should be given roughly equal weight.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us? Did we lose you?
There's a network connection error.
Oh.
By the way, if you're cold, there's a heater under the table. You can kick it on.
Is there?
Yeah, it's over at the, or John, or yeah, maybe it's over at the end of the table. But
Oh,
can you hear us now,
so far away.
Oh, I see.
Brandon?
You want me to turn
Yeah,
it
a
off?
little bit better. I'm still getting some.
Try refreshing your browser.
There was a person on Facebook, I believe it under Geek Therapy, was asking to evaluate a intake form.
Asking me to?
No, he wants to evaluate an intake form.
Oh,
Should I tag you on that? So
yeah, tag me.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got many different ones. It depends on the setting. Can you hear us now? Nope.
That's better. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if it starts to get garbled, try refreshing. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we have to do it. Let us know if you can't hear us, because then I'll refresh on our end. Okay. Accepting that each player's preferences and desires should be given roughly equal weight first requires us to compromise on our own tastes. This is easier said than done. Many of us become game masters in the first place because we want greater control over the gaming experience. That's not my experience.
No.
I was made to keep game mastering because everybody wanted me to keep GMing. I did not want to GM. I liked
Same.
playing.
Yeah.
What's that?
Same, because like everyone's like, all these people are like, I want to play. I'm like, well, I don't know how to GM, but I
Right.
guess I'm gonna learn now.
Yeah. I happen to have more books than anybody else. I happen to have a better grasp of the rules than anybody else. Whatever the reasons were, wherever I was at the time, I kept becoming the de facto GM, even though I just wanted to play.
Yeah.
And then later I'm like, okay, I'll embrace this, but I really do like to just play, but I end up the GM most of the time. And so where I've met other GMs where it is a control thing for them. They don't like to play because they don't like the loss of control. I don't think those are the better GMs. It's kind of like the unwilling hero, you know.
I actually prefer to GM.
Okay.
I
What's your reason for that?
I like to storytell.
Okay.
I like to tell stories, and I like to involve other people in my
Hey
stories.
guys, can you refresh? I'm getting
Okay.
really bad with understanding.
You bet. Any better?
Hello.
Can you hear us? Hello?
A little bit.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you've got your Discord invite, right? Let's try.
Yes.
let's-
Shall we switch to that?
Yeah, let's switch to Discord. Let's see, because it's just you, and we don't need the video for this, so let's load Discord.
He wasn't even using the video.
Right, exactly. So, and sometimes the audio is better on Discord. It depends.
Some days.
If we can't connect, then we'll come back to here. But I'm going to
Oh,
kill
sure.
it for now. It'll be the voice channel under yeah.
Underthing.
It will be under the main voice channel for the whole. Just under text channels, there's voice. It's the main one. Under RPG Research.
You got a lot of Discord channels.
Yes, he does.
Nothing compared to Zoe. And then you'll want to kill Jitsi.
As you clone.
You want to kill Jitsi?
Can you hear us?
please?
Yeah, when you said then you want to kill Jitsi, it like doubled it.
Right. Because we were under both. And now it should be.
Startled me.
Yeah. You'll want to kill Jitsi! Jitsi! All right.
All right, you were talking about how you enjoy DMing. Go ahead.
Yeah. John.
Yeah, I've always. I started as GM. The GMing was the first thing I did because my grandmother gave me the basic box set, and it was my game. I'm going to learn how to play, and I'm going to run it. I was 10. And I've always enjoyed storytelling.
Tell that I'm going to be right back. I'm going to go grab my Beckme because I
Okay.
always like to bring that up.
So I was 10 years old. I got in the first D&D rule set, and I read it and ran the stories because they were my games. And I've stuck with DMing because I love storytelling. There may be an element to the idea that that's where I started, so that's where I became comfortable with. It's kind of like in nursing or in many other training. There are several techniques to do the same thing, but the one you learn first is the one people tend to stick with.
Yeah.
I learned 5 techniques on how to start an IV, but I always go back to the first one I learned because that's the one I'm comfortable with, or I just prefer. So maybe that's why I've always preferred GMing, because that's how I started the game. But I've always preferred it because I like to tell stories.
I have a friend who's like that. He started as a player though, and then he wanted to be GM so he could tell his stories. And every story he's written is in one
Don't hurt
world,
yourself.
and he can move the gas.
Who's he?
my friend Ian, who drew for the Twitch show once, he prefers GMing,
Okay.
unlike me, and he likes it because that's the only way he gets to write really or talk about his stories.
Oh, okay.
So he basically just created one like universe or multi-universe to like put every single story he's written into. Yeah.
So I originally started. I played one game at like one of my friend's birthday parties. Her older brother DM'd, and then after that, I just got super into it, and I bought all the books because I knew that none of my friends were gonna start it because we're all like super lazy, and so I had to start it. And I've never really liked GMing. I'm just not big on storytelling and just all that part. I like the rules aspect of it, but so, and I also didn't start in a very good setting with all of the players I had.
That's the Wayback Machine. It's 1970s.
But so I GM'd for about a year, and then one of my players asked if, like, over the summer he had actually been creating a campaign, and so he asked if he could DM the next year, and so I'm like, heck yeah, I'd totally rather play. But so either he asked to be the GM, so either that means that he wants to be DM, or he thought he wanted to be a DM, and now that he's being it, he might not want to be it. Which is
Be careful what you wish for, Mr. Limpid.
Oh, I know of another. They play Pathfinder, but every single person in that group DMs, and they take turns.
Yeah, there are a lot of
week.
groups that do that.
Yeah, which I found interesting. And
yeah, share the wealth.
Yeah, and that's great when you find that.
yeah.
You know, and at least I get to play more because John will GM, and there's
Yeah.
other GMs here, so I get to play more because I really enjoy that. I really do. It's a lot less work too.
Yes.
And I'm happy to do the work. I don't, I do a lot of work as a game master, and I really enjoy getting to play too. And it's been a long time since I got to play a character like in a prolonged campaign. I haven't been able to do that in years.
That's why I'm happy to have the Twitch show.
Yeah, because you
like,
get to be in a campaign.
that might last longer than a year.
It could last years if you guys if we keep doing it. Yeah. So I intend to. I'm not going anywhere soon. So we're passing those earlier editions around. I have actually the wooden box version of the original pamphlets, etc., which were really disorganized.
Which I haven't played.
Oh really?
I
You weren't
own-
there for those nights when I ran them when
No.
it came out.
No,
I ran A0 against the Slave Lords, like the precursor to A1 through 4,
right.
using the original D&D. And I got to play with John, owner of Merlin's.
Yeah, I
and
remember
he saved the day.
when-
Everybody else was dying, and he was a first level wizard, and he literally stood over and saved the party because he had a protection from evil, 10-foot radius, something, whatever, and was able to drive the zombies back. Anyway, he saved the entire party. It would have been TPK except for him. And he was just like, that was awesome. Because he almost never plays because he's running his stores all the time.
Yeah.
Brandon, what about you? Do you ever GM or you just play or?
I like both.
Okay.
But I tend to like alternate between the two.
Okay.
So like I started as a player, and I moved to a different city. Started trying to get my friends into it. So being the only person reading about it and having the books, I started DMing, and that was 3.5.
Okay.
And a lot of them were like super religious and had been influenced by the Satanic Panic, so I had like convinced them to play. Like I had one friend whose entire family was like super against it, so I had to let him play a centaur at like first level, so he was way overpowered to get him to play. And he had a blast, so once I finally got him playing, he did. But aside from that tangent, I've been in games where the DM's just been really, really bad, and that like makes me want to DM more.
Okay. All right.
It sounds like a
And then after a long
some kind
time
of
of like
controlling
DMing, you get that itch to play as the player.
Yep.
So I like go back and forth.
Okay. And that's then I like that too. I like being able to.
I'm like that cat that can't decide if it wants to go in or out.
The answer is yes.
Now, one of the things too is about introducing people to role-playing gaming, and it talks about how the books don't really do a good job about how to role-play. Right? They give you the game mechanics and how to do the game system. They don't really tell you how to play the game, or better yet, how to run the game. There's one exception to that, back in 1983. And it started with the Redbox Menser, the Frank Menser edition. It's called, its short version is BECME. Basic, Expert, Companion, and that's not those, this is after those. Masters and Immortals. And so I moved all of them into the Immortals box once I had that. So they're all in here. And each one was a box set, and I just eventually moved them. And each one was 2 booklets. You had your player's manual and your Dungeon Master's rulebook. Weren't not very long either. This one's 48 pages. This is the basic one. This is 60 pages. This is just levels 1 through 3, and then Expert lets you do like levels 4 through 10, and on up and such, all the way up to 35th plus level as Immortals, where you become gods, which was awesome. And one of the here are his deities. Like one of the first modules, you're like walking through lava in the picture and stuff. It was just very cool. I miss doing a full BECME campaign. It's been a long time because you get to go all the way to God level, not 18th level AD&D super powerful wizard level, deity level. That's pretty cool. Hard to get there.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, sorry to interrupt everybody.
Nope, it's okay.
That reminds me of a time when a friend of mine both made level 30 characters to have like a battle to the death.
Yep.
And I made a barbarian, and he made a monk, and I was just beating the crap out of him until he hit me with a quivering palm, and I immediately died.
Yes. I had a friend and I, because we'd binge gamed for like a 30-day period, like 16 hours a day one summer. We were teenagers, it was between school. We just binge played, and I eventually was such high level, I created and we've talked about it before, I created the Colosseum of the Gods, where you could challenge any deity in the deities and demigods to a one-on-one battle on the prime material plane. And if you beat them, they could no longer be on that prime material plane. And we were kicking the gods' butts. That was pretty funny. Anyway.
If you stat it, the players will kill it.
Exactly. If you actually play, and we'll talk about that a little later. So, in the player's manual of the Frank Metzer red cover basic, this is 1983 version. This is arguably the best introduction to role-playing gaming I've ever seen in any issue of a role-playing game so far. And it starts at basically Conquer, Choose Your Adventure. And it starts you as a player, and page 3, page 1 is the table of contents. Page 2 is, hi there, start here, what is role-playing, what role will I play, your character's basic stats. It just gives you 3 stats to start with: strength, dexterity, intelligence, and then your first adventure. You're starting an adventure right away by page 2, really. And then it walks you through, and it says, okay, you walk through, the goblin has attacked yet, how to hit. Now you practice rolling a d20 die, and here's hit points. And it just walks you through step by step, and you're doing a solo adventure module, a little simple one. And it just slowly layers the complexity up as you go. It's like, okay, you've been hit, here's how you track hit points. Okay, poisoned, well, here's what you roll for that for a saving throw, and just slowly layers it in the context of the game. And so you do that, and then and that's just like a page or 2 of that. Then later, you've got to do some other stuff. You start adding charisma and wisdom and such in the context of the game of why they matter. And so you do that. And then, so ending number 1, you miss the saving throw. So you get poisoned and such. So this is a little choose your own adventure, but with dice rolling, etc. So a little more than just a straight choose your own adventure. So that's page 7. Ending number 2, you make the saving throw. Page 8. And then winning, it says at the end. You've just played a D&D game. This adventure was designed to show you some of the basic parts of the game. You played a fighter who tried to survive in the dungeon while finding monsters and treasure. You succeeded, so your character wins. Right? Very basic, fundamental, but you have just gotten a little taste of the game by yourself without having to rely on any other players. And, hopefully you're not excited to want to do more. And it slowly builds up that information now with more classes, more dice, etc. But they've gotten hooked with some fun right at the beginning. I think he got it better than almost anybody. Any other? I'm not aware of any others that do it quite that way. Are you?
No.
No.
Not as a choose your own adventure start.
Right. And so if I was ever gonna publish a role playing game, I would emulate that exact same format. I would want to get this, and it's what I did when I taught music. You know, I played over 20 instruments. At one point, I had over 30, 40 guitar students, and some went on to USO tours and stuff. Nobody famous, but you know, some make a living at it. They're far better guitarists than I'll ever be. But my approach was, don't burden them with all the theory and everything else. Get them hooked first. Right? It's kind of the drug dealer, like, give them the first hit free. Get them hooked.
Yeah.
So get them loving it first. And this is a recreation therapist perspective. Get them loving it first, then they'll do the hard work because they have intrinsic motivation to push through the hard stuff. So in music, I would say, well, what is it you want to play? Why are you wanting to learn guitar? Like, one student wanted to play Sean Colvin, Shotgun Down the Avalanche or something, like whatever it was. And I didn't know the song. I'm like, can you play it for me? And I found the music, and I said, okay. So I teach her a few basic exercises that were directly related to learning that song. And within 2 or 3 lessons, she's playing a very bad but primitive version of that song, and she was stoked, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm already doing this in just 2 or 3 weeks. I thought it would take me years. And then just did it that way, found what their intrinsic motivation was, and got them doing it as quickly as possible. They don't have to do it well, they're just doing it. And then layer on the complexity and keep motivating and keep doing that. And that's what he did here. So same thing, he did the same thing as a dungeon master. Which, again, I think a lot of game companies should pay attention to this. So it gives a very quick summary of a lot of stats, because you're the DM, you got to remember all the stuff that you learned in the player's manual first.
I thought I was the only one who colored my DM, my basic books.
I didn't cover that one. This was somebody else, but yeah, I didn't. Anyway, so it is the dungeon master's job. The DM's role is now finding your friends, getting your friends together because you've played. You're like, hey, I really want to run this game for you guys. Here's the basic on how to play. Pick your character. Now we're going to do something. So running the game. During most of the D&D game, the dungeon master leaves the decisions to the players. And I like that aspect. That's a lot of things. That's something a lot of DMs I don't think always get. That actually you're leaving most of the decision making for the players, not the DM. DMs just laid out the choices. They don't make the choice for them. Offering choices, actions, so forth, but the course of the game is determined by the actions of the party, is decided by all the players. The DM can almost relax and enjoy the character's progress as they explore, make maps, solve puzzles, and so forth. It's kind of mixed on that. So it then walks you through basically a very rigid, it's railroaded. But that's what you need when you're first starting out, right? You've never run it before. And it tells you exactly what to read, exactly how to read it, exactly how to resolve it. It's very controlled, it's very minimal. But it's your first game that you're DMing. And it walks you through very carefully what to read out loud, what the DM needs to know, what to read aloud, how to interpret results. And you have and again, this is by this adventure that you've just started is only on page 3 of the DM's guide, which is really page 2. And then that goes through to your first game, then we got the map. Ending an adventure. So that goes through to page 13. Then you find it. That's the beginning of the DM. And at the end of it, you've learned a lot as a DM because you've learned that they layer on the complexity of the rules slowly. And then there's more to learn after that. And I think there's actually a second adventure in here. I think they actually then do a more complex version. Or maybe that's in the player's manual. You go through 2 adventures at least in the player's manual. So, let's see. Your first adventure. Yeah, it doesn't do a second one of the DM's guide. It wouldn't hurt to have a second more advanced one. But I really think game companies are hurting themselves not doing that. I think we would have even more adoption if they took that approach. I would love to see that happen. Thoughts on that?
Isn't Wizard of the Coast releasing a Choose Your Own Adventure like series?
They are.
Are they?
Yeah,
but it's Choose Your Own Adventure. It's not a solo module, right?
No, it's not a solo module.
Sure.
It's a full Choose Your Own Adventure book.
Yeah, there is a different, and we do have some old AD&D solo adventure books. They're not Choose Your Own Adventures. You roll dice and have a character sheet and track stats, just like Tolkien Quest and Middle Earth Quest. They're in the trailer. They're on the trailer.
Well, there's a couple right there. It's the Steve Jackson
some of those.
seasons.
Yeah. Because even the starter set for 5th edition doesn't walk you through quite. You have to do a lot more prep time.
Yeah.
This you can pretty much just open the book and start
Play.
and figure it out as you go. We've seen the same thing with Star Wars. Oh, you don't need to do any prep. You can just start running it. That has not been the case with the Star
After
Wars
you read
starter
this
boxes.
50-page pamphlet.
Right, exactly, which is daunting for a lot of people who, in this day and age especially, are more used to a video or whatever and want to just get going. They're not going to. You need to know your audience. So this doesn't quite do it. It's great for the small percentage that have the patience for it, and that's great. But again, I really want more people to really enjoy this activity. But there's a little bit of a gatekeeping thing going on too. People are like, no, we don't want all the people who don't put in the effort and blah, 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 right? You know, that's the thing.
In my day and age, I had
Yeah.
4 hit points.
Yeah.
4.
Anyway, so, where are we at? Okay, good. So again, he said Game Master's first place because we want greater control over the gaming experience. That is true for some Game Masters, but as you heard here, I don't know that if that's the majority or not. It'd be interesting to get a survey on that. We want to express our creativity, we talked about that, and try out the cool ideas we've been bubbling away in the back of our minds. No argument on that. It's all about striking a balance. If we sacrifice our own tastes too much, we'll get bored. And bored GMs run boring games, or really deadly games. On the other hand, the most innovative campaign concept in the world means zip if you can't get your players excited about it too. Yeah. So it's all well and good to talk about the things that the average player generally enjoys, but nobody's group is average, and being generally satisfied isn't good enough. Hear, hear. I agree. So the key to great GMing is to figure out what each of your players wants, and then to find a gaming style that contains a little something for everybody, including yourself. You've heard me rail about that forever. To pin this down more precisely, fill in a copy of the player goal chart, see below. It asks you to think about the types your players fall into and the emotional experiences that they seek from the game. I like that he does that. So all it is you have a player column, a player type column, and their emotional kick.
What player types does he give?
You're about to do that.
Okay.
That's what's the next paragraph.
Seal the circles.
That's why I was trying to get Valerie to join us as well, because she's the other player archetype specialist, and we've been working on the manual for that. So
If you have time on Thursday, you can do that to the characters, the players.
yeah, that's true. Well, there's a problem with this approach.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
There's a flaw to it compared to the approach I recommend.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good starting point to start thinking this way, but we're way down the road from this.
Okay.
But it's not a bad starting point. So he has player types, and I wrote in ARCA in front of types.
He was glad to know that you're editing his book as you go along.
Oh, that's heavily.
17 years
I
later.
heavily commented up. What's that?
17 years later.
Yeah. Like he cares, yeah. People play role-playing games for all sorts of reasons. And we did that when we had that reporter here interviewing just before I left on the trip, remember?
Right.
Find out where he's at on that. He asked each of us why we role-played. And it was that was a really great interview, I thought, for each of us. And I don't think that recording, I think that was a recording that was lost, wasn't it? Or he has it on his phone, which I have.
Right.
We'll have to go back through that. It was really great. But yeah, everybody has very different motivations. Some people it was for creativity. Some people it was to be a hero. Some people, it was to try on different things. It's different for everybody. It was very, very cool. Okay, so people play role-playing games for all sorts of reasons, but a few basic types tend to recur in large numbers. He notes that I didn't invent these categories, many of which originate with the late Glenn Blako. I have departed a bit from the traditional list, though. So he starts with the power gamer. Wants to make his character bigger, tougher, buffer, and richer. I would also call it min-maxer.
Mm-hmm.
However, success is defined by the rule system you're using. This player wants more of it. They tend to see this PC as an abstraction, as a collection of superpowers optimized for the acquisition of still more superpowers. They pay close attention to the rules with a special eye to finding quirks and breakpoints they can exploit to get large benefits at comparatively low costs. They want you to put the game back in the term role-playing game, and to give them good opportunities to add shiny new abilities to their character sheet. So, and yeah, I also call that the min-maxer. Comments on that?
Yep.
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 There is a little bit of bleed between the min-maxer and the rules lawyer.
Well, yeah, but But they're not arguing with you about the rules.
They
They're
just
they're
abuse.
they're using the rules. Well,
Well, they don't
they're
have to
making
abuse
you.
them.
They're maximizing the use of the rules.
Yeah.
Rules to their advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is different than
It's not
killing the
abusing,
game,
yeah.
arguing about the rules all the time. That's where the rules lawyer is a problem. Or telling the GM how to run everything all the time. That's a rules lawyer. The butt kicker. That's this guy's phrase. I also would call it the murder hobo.
Yes.
The butt kicker wants to let off steam with a little old-fashioned vicarious mayhem. They pick a simple, combat-ready character, whether or not that is the best route to power and success in the system. After a long day in the office or classroom, they want their character to clobber foes and once more prove their superiority over all who would challenge them. They may care enough about the rules to make the PC an optimal engine of distraction, or may be indifferent to them. So that's why it's different than a power gamer. So long as they get to hit things. They expect you to provide the character plenty of chances to engage in the aforementioned clobbering and superiority. That's a murder hobo. Just why? Fight. Comments on that?
So my entire group right now is murder hobos,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think.
They often cluster together.
Yeah, but I don't think it's because of those reasonings.
Okay.
I think it's just because. So the only people that they've ever been DM'd by are me and the other guy, and both of us are inexperienced,
Okay.
and so we haven't really given them the option of not just going and killing
That's
them.
all they know.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not that.
Well, in early
they don't-
Gygax
it's your fault.
modules,
Yes. It's not that they don't.
they
they
know
don't-
nothing else.
They don't understand that they don't have to fight these enemies to get out of dealing with
Like
them.
when Jen ran and we completely changed Lost Minds of Phandelver style.
Right.
When Jen ran it. That was great.
Yes, that was good.
That was a lot of fun.
This is a great first time for me going through Pandemic.
Like, very different style approach to that. That was a hoot. That was it. I'm sorry Jen's back in Boston. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was really enjoying her being there. Brandon, any comments?
I got a bit of a story.
Please.
So back in high school, I was DMing for that group thunder, and yeah, they had never really played before. They didn't know what to expect, right? And a few of them were, young teenagers just doing stupid stuff. And I don't remember what they did, but they got in a fight with like the guard, and several of them got arrested. And so, in order to try to show them like, hey, your actions have some consequences in the world, I did like a whole courtroom scene that went terrible. It basically blew up in my face.
Okay. So they didn't exactly learn the lesson you'd hope they learn, huh?
No, they did not. And
Did they pwn you?
I don't even remember what happened. I
Okay.
just remember it not going how I wanted, to the point where I'm just like, all right, you know what? I guess we're murder hobos.
Great. That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
So
Yes.
as long as like the whole group is up for doing that, like having a campaign with that is not at all a problem.
Sure. Right.
It's just
Yeah, if everybody's on the same page,
yeah.
well, like we talked about paranoia. If everybody's on the same page that this is how we're going to play the game, great, go for it, not a problem. But if you're in a game where there's more variety of interest and approach, then you need to be aware of that and considerate of that. And I try to front end load that, like the campaign we're in. I tried to make it very clear that there would be certain consequences to certain racial choices and such that might not match someone's preferred player style. And sometimes sometimes they don't always get that. No, I was saying that for a reason. It wasn't just saying it as a standard disclaimer. Like, no, this really will affect how much you enjoy the game if you choose a non-human class, for example. So, and that happens. The tactician is probably a military buff who wants chances to think their way through complex, realistic problems, usually those of the battlefield. They want the rules and your interpretation of them to jibe with reality as they know it, or at least portray an internally consistent, logical world in which the quality of the choices is the biggest determining factor in success or failure. They may view issues of characterization as a distraction, so role-playing and such. They become annoyed when other players do things which fit their PC's personalities but are tactically unsound. To satisfy them, you must provide challenging yet logical obstacles for their character to overcome. And I said that, and this could also overlap with the rules lawyer a little bit too, right? Because they're much more about the rules and the logic of it, and they're not interested in the role play and everything else. So they can be just a tactician, or they might also be a rules lawyer, depending on how far they take it.
And it seems like that that archetype could and doesn't always have to be, but be heavily metagamey.
Yes, could do a lot of discussion inappropriately outside of the game, the character and stuff. At least inappropriate in my consideration. And Dan is the first to admit that he's a tactical player. It shows that that's what he likes to do, is figure out those tactical situations. And that's fine, because we need a good, strong tactical player.
Yes.
And tactical situations will come up. Sometimes tacticians don't always understand how to deal with like political tactics and stuff, so sometimes they can be frustrated by that their normal tactics don't work in a like.
You mean backstabbing in this case doesn't mean with a literal knife?
right. Comments on that, Brandon?
I don't know. I think I fall into this category a little bit too.
Okay.
But I like to approach like problems in D&D as though it were real. I don't know how to explain this, but like I like it when the fantasy has like an anchor in reality sort of thing.
Sure.
So like the kinds of weapons that would be useful against a certain kind of foe are actually useful against them.
Right. Yeah.
Or I don't know. I like that verisimilitude.
Okay. Cool. The specialist favors a particular character type which they play in every campaign and in every setting. We had another word for that. The person always plays the same thing over and over. The most common subtype of specialist is the player who wants to be a ninja every time. Other specialists might favor knights, cat people, mischief makers, flying characters, or wistful druid maidens who spend a lot of time hanging out about sylvan glades with fairies and unicorns. The specialist wants the rules to support their favored character type, but is otherwise indifferent to them. To make a specialist happy, you have to create scenes in which the character can do the cool things for which the archetype is known.
Like in your city setting, you put a garden in there.
Thoughts and comments on that?
I played with somebody who's like that. Every game he played, he was a tiefling monk for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's a lot of ways you could play tieflings, but he was always like, no, tieflings are only like this. And I'm just like, no, they're not.
But for them,
okay,
that's
but
what it
I'm
is.
not the DM. And then the DM like banned him from playing any of his games because he always played the same character and like role played exactly the same, and he wanted the same thing every time. So it's like, well, he just got tired of it.
I personally, I try to make sure I don't do that as much as I can, and try to just choose random stuff. But in my group, there are definitely players who I've only seen them play two different characters, but both of those characters are very similar, and so I could see that. I don't even know if they're realizing they're doing it, but they're.
There's some longtime players, and John and I both know a number of them, that they will even use the same name, the same history, backstory, everything is the same. Yep. And if you don't like that, okay, fine. This is Bobo the Clown 13, right? It's the Bubbles 13th of the lineage. Yeah, Bubbles, yeah. I know John knows. There are just some people, they will only play this, and that's all they will play. And I'm like, wow,
that could be super hard to like balance with other people's fun.
Yeah,
too,
totally.
Because for a lot of people, they want to be immersed in the world they're playing in, and if there's something that just doesn't fit, then they can just take everybody out of the experience.
Sure.
So you're a ninja in medieval France.
I was going to say an elf monk and.
Yes, in Gamers, which again I don't think Brandon's seen yet, but in Gamers 2: Darkness Rising, it's a human-only adventure, and there are no martial arts monks, and the rules lawyer player, is very much a rules lawyer, shows up with an elf monk. He's like, no!
It's in the rule book. I can use it.
This is, yeah, exactly. He's like, it's in the rule book. You're messing with the rules, and it's killing the game. And so, again, the movies, especially Gamers 2 Darkness Rising, really illustrates beautifully a lot of topics we discuss, both the good and the bad and what to do and not to do it. That's why we use it so much. The method actor believes that role-playing is a medium for personal expression, strongly identifying with the character he plays. He may believe that it's creatively important to establish a radically different character each time out. The method actor bases his decisions on understanding their character's psychology and may become obstructive if other group members expect them to contradict it for rules reasons or in pursuit of a broader goal. I'm like, no, that's not my inner motivation. I would not do that. I don't care what the rules say. And I don't care what happens to the party. That's not what my character would do. They may view rules as, at best, a necessary evil, preferring sessions in which the dice never come out of their bags. Situations that test or deepen the character's personality traits are the key to entertaining the method actor.
I don't think I've ever come across anyone who's
I've
really
come across many.
into it. I think they're probably like people that I've watched on Twitch that
Yeah.
definitely fit
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but I've never really actually played with somebody
Okay.
like that.
People that I had that played like that were like amber diceless. Yeah,
Which that's appropriate.
Yeah, that's exactly what
the game
that's
to play,
for.
yeah.
And so I have rules, but most of the games I played, they didn't have a lot of people that were like, I'm in my character. But I have had definitely games where they sit down at the table and they never talk out of character.
Mm-hmm.
They always are in that character. Says, I must go to the bathroom now. Excuse me. And they actually get to go to the bathroom.
And that causes a problem with bleed and confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and we talked about that, like make sure you switch between your character's voice and your voice to reduce confusion and reduce hurt feelings and things like that. And the more distinctive you can make your character voice from your voice, the less confusion there is. And it makes it easier for the GM to say, oh, your character just said that out loud when you were trying to be quiet. Oh, well, you were doing it in voice. Right? And that's how I would train that person to change. And I'm like, oh, well, you just said you had to go to the bathroom out loud to the whole, in the game because you were saying it in character voice. So that's how I would try to modify their behavior for that. But yeah.
Well, you get inspiration because your character actually thought about going to the bathroom.
Yes, that's true. A mundane task. The storyteller. Like the method actor, is more inclined to the role-playing side of the equation and less interested in numbers and experience points. On the other hand, they're more interested in taking part in a fun narrative that feels like a book or a movie than in strict identification with their character. They're quick to compromise if it moves the story forward, and may get bored when the game slows down for a long planning session. You can please them by introducing and developing plot threads, and by keeping the action moving as would any skilled novelist or film director.
I like how you dropped into a voice reading that one.
That was intentional, yes. Of the storyteller.
I feel like that's the opposite of a power gamer, basically.
Yep.
In the sense that.
Yep. And all of these have
I usually
value.
find myself torn between the tactician and this one.
Okay. And by the way, we have...
Which is hard to balance. Sorry, go ahead.
He only lists like half a dozen. We have, through our play archetype specialist thing, a whole bunch of different archetypes. Do you remember what the last count was? 20-something?
I have it. I can pull it up. It's right
Yeah, we got 20-something archetypes. But he just, and that's fine. We don't have to be exhaustive. It's just knowing, you okay?
The Tourette's.
Oh, okay.
24.
Okay. 24 different player archetypes we've worked out so far, to some degree.
I feel like this is the kind of player that gets more excited when things go wrong or unexpected. There's more options for storytelling.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't fit the story.
Yeah. All right. The casual gamer, and this is an important one, and I don't know. Did we list the casual gamer? I know I meant to. So if it's not in there, make a note. We need to add that in there because this is actually an important one that is different than all the others and an important one to conclude. And I think it slipped through. What's that?
It's added.
Good. So the casual gamer is often forgotten in discussion of this sort, but almost every group has one, and that's true. Casual gamers tend to be low-key folks who are uncomfortable taking center stage, even in a small group. Often they're present to hang out with the group and game just because it happens to be the activity everyone else has chosen. Though they're elusive creatures, casual gamers can be vitally important to a game group's survival. They fill out the ranks, which is especially important in games that spread vital PC abilities across a wide number of character types or classes. Especially if they're present mostly for social reasons, they may fill an important role in the group's interpersonal dynamic. Often, they're the mellow, moderating types who keep the more assertive personalities from each other's throats, in or out of character. I mention the casual player because the thing they most fervently want is to remain in the background. They don't want to have to learn rules or come up with a plot hook for their character or engage in detailed planning. You may think it's a bad thing that they sit there for much of the session thumbing through your latest purchases from the comic book store, but hey, that's what they want. The last thing you want to do is force them into a greater degree of participation than they're comfortable with. Of course, if everybody in the group is sitting there reading your comic books, you've definitely got a problem. But it really makes a good point. That is an important thing that, we talk all the time about making sure everybody gets an equal chance to engage and such. But there are people that they're actually pretty darn happy just being in that environment. And they're not really that motivated they don't want the spotlight, but they want to be there. And if you push them
My
too...
concern
What's that?
would be, how do you tell that from a player who wants to be more engaged,
Yes.
but is too shy to speak up?
Yes, you have to be very careful that it's not just a shy player.
You ask them.
But probably not publicly, because if you do it publicly, that's the spotlight they don't want to be in.
Right.
You would want to do it discreetly. And part of it might just be through good observation.
Yeah. I mean, by asking, I mean like simple questions. Is there something you'd like to do right now?
That puts them in the spotlight, and they don't like to be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
So it's something you're going to want to have offline comments, discussions with them when they're not feeling the spotlight, where you're just the two of you talking and socializing and trying to work it in through there. Because if there's somebody who's uncomfortable with the spotlight, if you do that in the middle of the game, they're going to feel like because everybody's going to be looking at them, and that's going to make them uncomfortable, and they're going to be less likely to enjoy that, and they might just ghost you.
How do these casual players respond to combat? I mean, you roll the initiative, it comes on their turn.
They'll play.
I have a friend who, she is definitely a casual player in the sense that I've even talked with it about her and trying to figure out what would make it more enjoyable for her, because every time we are in play, I would ask her what she'd want to do, and she would just say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then during combat, she would just do a straightforward thing just to get the turn on.
Right. Yeah.
So what she said was that she doesn't actually really enjoy playing. She just enjoys everyone else's. She likes being there with everyone.
Just being part of the experience, not having to do the experience, just being around it. Mm-hmm. It's a social hangout.
Like spectating.
Yeah, like a wallflower.
Which is funny is I'm like that with everything besides like playing D&D.
Although I've seen some of it too with this current Twitch group. You've been a little bit more.
I am more like that with this group than I am normally.
I've been a little concerned about that. Is there a reason for that?
I think it's because I've never played a game where I didn't know anybody, and I still didn't know you or John really well, so I was just like, maybe these people I don't know. So that's like the first time I played where I didn't know anybody at all. Okay. Because I've always had at least one person where I can like connect with and bounce off with, and so far there's like
everybody's
no one.
A stranger here.
Yeah, and then also like there's nothing that like connects any of our characters either.
Yeah,
which makes it really difficult for me because I'm like.
Which is like Fellowship Focus.
Right. Yeah.
It would be very handy to help with that, or house building would have been really handy for that. And
Also, I had decided to make, because I've never played a character that's based off of me, like, at all, personality-wise. So, which was the wrong campaign to choose that for. But,
It's too real.
yeah.
okay, that's good
Yeah.
to know.
I have a question for Riley.
Hi.
That person you were talking about,
Yeah.
how did they react when other players interacted with her character?
Well, again, this was in my group of 10 people who've never played before, and so they don't interact with each other. So that never happened.
And 10 players is twice too many.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Uh,
played with 8, and
That's too
it's
many.
not fun.
2 of them, it would have been really great if it wasn't for, like, one person who I shouldn't have let him play, like, or even asked him if he wanted to play, but it was like everybody else in our friend group was gonna play, and it's like, I can't
Exactly,
leave you
that's exactly
out
what
because
happened.
that's
Yeah.
really awkward.
It's like a party.
But I
Like,
know
we have
you're
a party.
going to
I only
be-
want 4 people there, but I gotta invite everybody because their friends will be upset and
Yeah.
they'll hurt their feelings.
But I ended up having to do that. I had to
Yeah.
I had to cut 5 people
Right.
out of my group.
Which
and
now
I
they
just,
feel even more hurt.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so like I was talking with
So the alternative is like, can I split this into 2 groups? Like, you guys come at this time and you guys come at this time.
but
That's the way to save
Well, it's
that,
even-
if they're worth saving.
well, what was even worse was the 5 people that got cut
Yeah.
were the people that were playing less than the others. So the other players were definitely more dominant and more
Right.
into it.
Yep.
And they were also less of my friends. So
Okay. Yeah.
like it would be weird to create a second group with
Okay.
them because we weren't nearly as close.
Okay.
But so after I cut it, I tried to talk to the girl who was the casual player, and she didn't want to just come and watch. Like I gave her the option of just watching, just to be there, but she
Mhm.
didn't want to because she felt bad for the other people that got cut out.
And
so-
didn't want to take the slot.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she just
Interesting.
So I ask because I feel like it's less being put on the spot if you're asked by another player than if you're asked by the DM.
Yeah.
It's more of like, when you're called on by the teacher, you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah, versus
you're
fellow
talking to
student.
a classmate,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But also, unlike that, I actually prefer it when people call me out.
Okay.
Especially in gaming. Like, if it's like classroom set, I'd be like, don't look
Yeah,
at me,
yeah,
no eye
yeah.
contact.
But in the game, you want that chance to.
But in game,
Okay.
like, it makes it easier.
And you
on
see, I
me.
do that with
yeah,
you. I go,
which I
all right,
prefer.
well, what's River doing? What's River doing? So,
Because
we don't want to pass
I'm
you
also
over.
like the person that's like, I don't want to interrupt anybody.
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I
But
like
in-
it when the other characters are trying to engage her.
Yes. Me
Yeah.
too. Me too. And I think again with a long campaign, River's going to get to come into her own just fine.
Yeah.
With a long campaign, it's okay. These things will develop organically over time, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not good in shorter campaigns.
The
though.
pugs.
There's not enough time. Yeah. Or the
Pug, pick up
yeah.
the game in case anybody's
Yeah.
listening and doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That you've got to make sure people get, and it's much tougher to know what player types you have in a short game. It's much more difficult because you usually don't have time for the evaluations either.
I'm
So
one of those players that talks probably a bit too much in groups, so I purposefully, like, if there's somebody that hasn't talked in a while, try to engage their character.
Yep. And I, being very ADHD, have to frequently rein myself in. So I was like, ooh that, ooh that, ooh that, ooh that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's close to home.
Yeah. I'm very enthusiastic about many things. All right. So the third column is emotional kick. The types will only get you so far. Many people defy categorization. Hear, hear. Most display traits of more than one type. Right? And that's why we start with traits.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
we look at multiple archetypes. All of us have our own individual quirks, which can be more important than the style category we fall into. Even so, the exercise of matching your players to the categories helps you to start thinking about what they want from the game. Yes. That's what I say is with the player archetype specialist, their first step is just to watch and recognize these traits and then categorize blah blah blah. So then they can emulate them to make life difficult for the GM and such, to train them. But that's the thing, is all of this discussion, anybody who watches this now or in the recorded version, we're bringing this all up as to get you to start thinking in these terms. Because a lot of people, as it's just automatic. They don't really understand it. And then when something goes wrong, they have no idea how to fix it. But when you start thinking, it's all about mindfulness and such. When you start thinking in these terms, then you have all that awareness. When we talk about with group dynamics, when we're in storming phase versus norming phase, when you start watching for that, like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Okay. When you're looking at the player archetypes and stuff, like, oh, it makes total sense that that's how he keeps playing his character, because he's kind of a more of a rules lawyer type. Because otherwise it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to play it that way in the context of the game, because it's kind of hurting the group. I'm like, no, that makes sense. Now I get their motivation and such. But you have to be made aware of these things and discuss them. And then that gives you a lot more power and control over your own experience of the game. It becomes less random and kind of like just arbitrary, right? Not controlling others, but just having a better understanding of what's happening, as we do with any science.
It seems to me to be bleeding into a bit of like applied behavioral analysis.
Oh, totally.
Because
totally,
behavior is communication. So paying attention to what the players are doing
yes.
with their characters.
That's exactly.
Is telling you exactly what they want to do.
You bet. That's exactly right.
The thing that I've kind of realized when I've been watching people at Spark is that most of the archetypes you can't really tell if it's the archetype or if it's just their character, and that's like specifically
really
well, not all of them, but
okay. Some of them
and some of them you also have to you have
the guy
to,
whose name starts with an N.
Yeah.
He's a very distinctive archetype.
There's definitely some archetypes that you can see, but others
yes.
like the one where you play the same character every campaign. If you only watch them play one campaign,
right, you wouldn't know.
You have no idea.
That's right. You bet. Without additional reference.
But or like other things, like if it's the power gamer, you wouldn't know that that's how they always play their character. As like it's not
but
like
if they are very much about the mechanics of the game and not the rest of it, that's where that would start to come out.
But you wouldn't. But from where I am, and just observing,
sure.
You can't really tell that that's how
you
they
didn't see how they created their character.
Right. But that's also why you're observing, because over time you're going to start seeing these players play different games, and then you're going to start seeing those patterns. That's why you keep coming back to observe some more to see if someone would show up more over time. Yeah, in one-shots it can be really difficult to tell. Some are really obvious, and those are usually the ones that are more intensely that set of traits, and others are more subtle. And if they're not disruptive, then it's not a big deal. If it's balanced, it's okay. We're looking for the disruptive ones, that whether they're disruptive in the short term or in the long term, because we want you to role play that for the GM, so the GM learns how to deal with those types so that it doesn't ruin their game. That's what we're wanting you to watch for. The more subtle ones are great, but if they're not disruptive, it's just an interesting experiment. You don't have to worry about that as a player specialist. You're looking for the disruptive ones.
You also, it's super rare where a new player who's never played before would show almost any characteristics of them, because unless it's
they don't know.
Part
they don't
of
know what
their
they
personality.
like. Yeah, exactly.
I think it could also be that people want different things from different games that they're playing.
Sure. Well, that's what I was just about to read.
For this campaign, or a different one for different campaign.
That's what I was just about to read, and we're going to have to wrap it up because it's 9 o'clock.
I'm also surprised it doesn't have anything like a Munchkin in there.
Yeah, and again, he was, I think, for size, he just kind of kept it to a minimum. So I'm going to quickly cover, I'm not going to go into depth because we'll have to come back to it next time because we're at 9 o'clock. But what you just said, their motivations, emotional kick. The types only get you so far. Many people defy categorization. Many display traits in more than one type. All of us have our own individual quirks, which can be more important than the style category fall into. Even so, the exercise of matching your players to the categories helps you to start thinking about what they want from the game. In the next column on our worksheet, we go one step further and ask ourselves what emotion each of the players wants to experience in the course of the game. Power gamers generally want to feel a sense of reward. Butt kickers seek the flush of martial victory. Tacticians want to feel clever. Specialists' emotional kicks depend on the sort of character type they play. Ninja players like to feel sneaky and untouchable. Fairy princesses want a chance to be mystical and alluring. Players of knights want chances to feel noble and righteous. Even if you can't exactly see what draws Joe to play fish people all the time, or Janine to always want to fly, it's easy enough to see what they want. A specialist wants chances to play out their characters' defining traits, whatever they may be. Method actors want to feel an intense emotional connection to their characters, as brought about by the dilemmas they face in the course of the game. They're concerned not so much with what their PCs do as to why they do it. Storytellers want the overall game to move quickly and resemble a fictional narrative. If you can involve a storyteller's PC in an ongoing subplot, advancing it slightly every session, so much the better. Don't worry about the casual gamer. If they start to show greater involvement in the game, by all means figure out what they like and give them more of it, otherwise let them be. And then he has a whole aside about becoming conscious of what you already do. So another question we have to ask ourselves as we strive to better our techniques is whether GMing is a talent or a skill. It's kind of nature versus nurture. In other words, is it an innate ability that some of us have and some of us don't, a talent, or is it something we can learn, a skill? So he argues that at this point in the development of the hobby, this is 2001, it's a talent. Those who do well at it are good because they happen to already possess the qualities like creativity, an intuitive grasp of narrative, and sensitivity to group dynamics that the task requires. However, by finding concrete ways to teach and enhance those qualities, we can turn it into a skill, which is what I've been trying to do all this time. Repeat it. Like, Drake and others keep saying, I wish I could find more GMs like you. And I keep saying, well, there's got to be plenty of them out there. Okay, if not, how do we create more like that? Like any other profession, you may have some people who naturally have a talent for it. Now can you replicate and train that in others? Can you mentor others, even if it's not automatic? Can you develop those skills? In computer science, I've hired many people who some of them had innate abilities, and so they were easier to teach than those without. But I could teach the ones without the innate abilities as well. They may not climb as high up in the hierarchy because they don't have the innate talent for it, but they can get pretty high and make a good living and do a good job at some middle tier or something like that. They can be trained to do that. Same thing with role-playing game. You'll have some people who are really just going to stand out because they assimilate it all really quickly and naturally, but we can certainly train people to be good DMs to provide a good gaming experience.
It's like acting as well.
Sure. Yeah. We're going to have to stop it there because we're at the end of our time. We're only on page 5 of 33 pages. That's why I said it's part 1. Do you guys like this, though? Are you enjoying this as a conversation and approach to cover theory, but in a flowing context here? Brandon?
I'm enjoying it. I think it's interesting that you can definitely tell the dates by the references he's making.
Sure. Well, and I was going to bring out, I have Little Wars from H.G. Wells. And so in here, everything is he, and I'm generalizing as they and such just because I don't want to. But H.G. Wells is very much, right, it's 1913. And I was going to read a little bit just to give an example of how much the cultural change has been. Because he talks about it's for little boys of creative, or the rare girls who might have a little bit of a creative talent or something. Right? It's just very, oh my goodness, ouch.
Years ago.
Yeah, 1913. It was okay. I mean, at least he didn't rule them out.
A little over 100 years ago, he accepted the possibility that somewhere there might be a female who would think.
Who likes wargaming. Although, there aren't a lot of female wargamers. You look at my surveys at conventions and Worldcon and everything, very small percentage of female wargamers.
How much of that is the dynamic of the game and how much of that is gatekeeping?
That is another question.
I was wondering the same thing.
That is certainly another question. So I will say with tabletop role-playing gaming, my early experience was pretty balanced. Mm-hmm. And then when the press said all these bad things, it became social gatekeeping, that it wasn't the gamers that were keeping the girls out. It was society said girls don't do this. Yeah. And that only freaks and geeks do this. And so the girls shied away from it because they're afraid of being associated with it. And you still see that with Big Bang Theory and stuff, making comments like girls don't play games, gamers never get dates, all those comments and such. So it creates inculcated attitudes, and we've talked about that plenty of times before. There are gamers who do the gatekeeping themselves, but most gamers I know would love to have a more gender-balanced group. And with wargaming, it's going to depend. I think the older grognards, I think you're going to run into that. Don't let the girls ruin our boys' game. Right. And with the younger gamers, they're like, no, we'd love to have girl gamers. And they're just not interested, right? So I think you get a mixture. You look at the challenge of getting more and more women into engineering and math and stuff like that. And some of it's cultural and some of it's just preferences and who knows. Make the opportunities available. Maximize the opportunities. But don't force people either. let it be a choice.
I think if you want more girls and more gaming, start getting the girls that are in military units,
Mm-hmm.
like actual army females,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to be more interested in a combat simulation.
Maybe. Yeah, I found very few female gamers wanted to play Twilight 2000. And it was like my third favorite game I ran all the time. We were running, it was at MERP and AD&D and Twilight 2000 and Call of Cthulhu, all those. And Twilight 2000 was a favorite for a lot of the gamers, but very few of the female gamers wanted to play Twilight 2000. It was a very military, gun
Extremely
combat
militaristic.
survival game, post-apocalyptic. It was during the Cold War eras of the 80s and 90s. It's a great game. Good mechanics. It's a survival. It's tough. It's gritty. There's no magic. There's no real science fiction to it. But it's actually a lot of fun, and it starts with action, and then you're just trying to stay alive. It's all, you start out in Europe and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I really had trouble finding female players that wanted to play it, and they would try it, and just a lot of them were like, it's not really. They liked MERP and AD&D and Call of Cthulhu and all the others much more. They did not like Twilight 2000.
You know what's funny now that I think about it? In junior high, it was the first time I was getting into anime and just not role-playing games, but video games and stuff. The only reason I got into that at the beginning was because there were two girls that were my friends who were really into military sort of first-person shooter sort of games, and they actually started an airsoft clan, which everyone else was male.
Okay, cool.
But like these two junior high girls, like creating this airsoft clan for like junior high, high school, and college aged. Well, pretty much everyone else is male. People, this group, for like organizing like airsoft.
There's a Geek Gamer Girls Club here through me, although I think it might be defunct, but it was female gamers only and such here. And I was like, yeah, I really hope we'll get rid of a lot more of the that separation and everything, because it's definitely more fun when it's all mixed, I think. So we're going to continue this. So this Thursday, of course, you're going to be running the game, the Waterdeep adventure. And then next Monday you'll be continuing it because it'll be game day again.
Right.
So next week it'll be on Thursday that we continue this discussion of Robin's Laws of Good Game Mastering. Of course, we just spiked up to 8 viewers, and all of a sudden we're getting a bunch of viewers. All of a sudden it's going up.
Hi, guys.
Right as we're wrapping up.
Quick, rewind everything while you got a chance.
Yeah. But we'll continue in becoming conscious of what you already do as a game master, the talents and traits, using the player goal chart, getting to know new players, and then picking your rules set, right, for your players. Now, you don't always have that luxury, and it talks about that. You know, in your area, you might have plenty of gamers. You can pick what you want. I ran this when I moved to Spokane. 2004, I started to put the groups together, and I wanted to run MERP, right, because I love Middle Earth, and I liked MERP and Rollmaster and all that. Could not find a single player to play, because it was MERP and Rollmaster. Everybody was doing D&D 3rd edition. I did not play. I'd stopped buying D&D with 2nd edition. I was not going to start all over again.
Too late now!
Well, so I could not get anybody to try a new game. I couldn't get anybody to do Cthulhu. I couldn't get anybody to do anything but D&D or Warhammer 40k wargaming, which I'm not into, or card flopping. And I was just like, what the hell? What's with Spokane? So I was like, all right, fine. I'll introduce people through. I'll get 3rd edition. I'll learn that. So I play a little bit of it, and then I will do a Middle Earth adaptation, which is where AD 20 evolves.
Right.
But first, I'll get them hooked on my jamming style, and then he talks about that. Like, well, fine, play what you want to play, then try to migrate them in the direction where you want them to play, and it worked. I started, did that, and then I got them to play in Middle Earth, and they loved playing them the way I did, because I know Middle Earth backwards and forwards, like, Tolkien Society founders and all that here, Other Minds Magazine, Middle Earth Talk Radio.
All right.
So then I was like, there's a system that represents Middle Earth much better than I can do with D&D. I'm like, all right, we'll try it. So I made some MERP characters, and they liked it. And I said, well, Rollmaster adds more detail and options than just the basic MERP rules. So then I got the next thing you know, we're playing MERP Rollmaster with all the complexity, and they were loving it. It became their favorite thing for years. So I was nudging them a little bit that way. But first I had to play by their rules, literally. And then they had to like my jamming style to want to try something else. So And he actually started. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that's the other thing is hopefully others will be able to relate to these conversations that we're each having from different perspectives. We're varied in age and background in here, and so I think that's really good for everybody else who's watching this, and our Patreon supporters who will see this after, or our subscribers who can. So the thing I noticed, you know how it gets saved automatically,
Right.
but now only our subscribers can access that. So I'm kind of mixed about that, but I guess it's appropriate to our Patreon thing. So if you're a subscriber, you can watch these recordings right immediately on Twitch until they get deleted. They last about 2 weeks till they get deleted. Meanwhile, we upload the higher quality local recorded version to Patreon, our Patreon supporters, who then can get access to that for a month or more before the general public, and then they're available to the public forever. So it's a good thing we're doing it that way because how Twitch deletes everything.
Right.
But I didn't realize when we turned on the monetization that it was going to automatically lock people out. Then a little. I guess it's appropriate because we were just making it so they weren't available anyway. So I guess that's better
Right.
than anything.
They're doing it for us.
Sure. Yeah. But I'm glad you guys liked that. I hope you found that informative. Brandon, so let us know if Thursday's going to work out or not for you.
You cut out right after you said right.
Brandon, let us know if Thursdays are going to work out for you.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I'll let you know.
Okay.
When this email server starts working.
Oh, is it still? Oh my gosh. Okay, I got to get all that moved over. On my huge to-do list. Okay. Yeah. Well, I hope that didn't get lost. Double check on that email if it bounced back to you or not. So,
Okay.
I might have to resend it. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'm glad you enjoyed that, and I'll see some of you Thursday and some of you not. Now, again, if you have a ride problem, if you aren't persuaded, if you fail your persuade roll, let others know on the list so that they can carpool you and stuff. So that generally locally that should not be a problem because there's enough of us. Yes.
Are you playing with us Thursday?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I play when I can. I get to. I'm here for now until December 1st at PAX East. I'm in town, I believe. I don't know what's happening Thanksgiving. I'll see what's going on then.
I'll have 3 players.
Yeah, I'm going to play my favorite character that I've ever made.
Awesome.
Will the game be on any
but I don't know.
program, or is it just over Discord or something?
What do you mean?
No, we're not doing Roll20 or
we don't. Yeah, we don't use Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or any of those things. We don't like to do that. I don't like to do that.
I'm not a techie.
And I am techie, and I feel those tools are helpful under certain settings, if not all else fails, but I think interfere with the overall role-play experience. And I've used them many times, and I feel like they keep getting in the way rather than... I mean, there are, again, certain specific situations they're extremely helpful and appropriate, but I think in our case they're not.
We're definitely going to have to make sure we have the map.
Overhead camera?
Overhead
that's
camera.
Just a matter of
we can,
flipping it.
yeah.
Yeah, let's just turn it on and off. So
Yeah.
that's easy enough to do. Okay. And I'll be here so I can, as a player, I can run some of the tech for you for that. No problem.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Brandon, for joining us. So, again, keep me posted. Let me know. And start watching those videos. And I'll start... Let's see what I can do about the email. Because we've still got to set you up with access to other stuff as well, but at least we've gotten you started. Like I got to add you to the Google email list and such, which is where we do our announcements and discussions there. But at least we got you started. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and hang out in Discord because we post stuff in there and conversations get going from time to time, and it's just a place to hang out. Ciao for now.
I will lurk.
Good. Lurking. Excellent. All right. And wherever you may be, happy gaming and namarie.
And dream well.
Good night.
Good evening.
Good morning.